The platypus was called a hoax. In 1799, a preserved animal pelt arrived at the British Museum from the colony of New South Wales. The naturalist who examined it took a pair of scissors and cut at the seams around the bill, looking for the stitches he was certain he would find. He did not find them. He published the description anyway, noting that the animal naturally excites the idea of some deceptive preparation by artificial means. The animal was a platypus, and the scientific community spent the next 30 years arguing about whether it was real. The platypus, Ornithorhynchus anatinus, is a small semi-aquatic mammal native to eastern Australia and Tasmania. Adults are roughly 40 to 50 centimeters long, including the tail. They live in burrows along freshwater rivers. They eat insects, crustaceans, and small fish from the water column. That is the boring summary. The interesting summary is that the platypus has been the subject of a series of taxonomic, biological, and chemical claims that no other mammal can match. Every time scientists made a confident statement about what mammals do, the platypus turned out to be doing the opposite. Every time scientists declared a feature impossible, the platypus turned out to have it. Today we are going to walk through each of the major objections that 19th and early 20th century naturalists raised against the platypus, and we are going to see how each of those objections held up. The first objection raised by George Shaw at the British Museum in 1799 was that the platypus could not be real because it had a duck's bill stitched onto a mammal's body. Shaw was not being unreasonable. 18th century European naturalists had been burned before. Chinese taxidermists had a well-known trade in stitching together hybrid creatures and selling them to gullible European collectors. Just before entomologist William Charlton died in 1702, he created a fraudulent butterfly specimen that Linnaeus later included in his catalog. The fraud was not exposed until 1793, when another entomologist discovered the ink markings painted on its wings. The platypus, arriving as a single preserved skin, looked exactly like the kind of fraud the scientific community had learned to expect. Shaw cut at the bill with scissors. He looked for stitches. There were no stitches. The bill was attached as a single continuous piece of biological tissue. The cut marks Shaw made are still visible on the original specimen. It is stored in a box in the Mammal Tower of London's Natural History Museum to this day. The bill is not a beak. It is a flexible, leathery sensory organ. It is covered in tens of thousands of receptors that detect electrical signals from the muscles of the platypus's prey. The platypus hunts entirely with the bill. Eyes, ears, and nostrils close underwater. It is the only mammal that hunts by electroreception. The objection was wrong. The animal is real. The bill is real. It just is not a beak. The second objection raised throughout the early 19th century was that mammals do not lay eggs. They give birth to live young, and they nurse their young with milk. Anyone claiming the platypus laid eggs was clearly mistaken or lying. This objection persisted for decades. Australian naturalists reported watching platypus mothers lay eggs in burrows. European biologists refused to accept it. The argument was that defining mammals required some firm rule, and produces milk and live young was the rule. In 1884, a young Cambridge zoologist named William Caldwell traveled to Australia specifically to settle this argument. He spent months in the Queensland bush. He hired Aboriginal trackers to locate platypus burrows. He found a female with eggs. He sent a telegram to a scientific meeting in Montreal that read, in full, "Monotremes oviparous, ovum meroblastic." Translated, monotremes lay eggs, and the eggs develop the way reptile eggs develop, not the way mammal embryos normally do. The objection collapsed. Mammals were redefined. Today, the platypus and the 4 echidna species are classified as monotremes, egg-laying mammals. They still produce milk, they are still mammals, the category just had to expand. Mammals, it turned out, did sometimes lay eggs, just rarely. The third objection was that mammals do not produce venom. This was confidently stated in textbooks well into the 20th century. Snakes have venom, some lizards have venom, a few insects have venom, mammals, no. Male platypuses have a hollow spur on each hind ankle. The spur is connected to a gland in the upper thigh. The gland produces venom. The venom is delivered by stabbing. Naturalists who handled platypuses had been reporting venomous stings for decades. The reports were dismissed as superstition or species confusion. Australian doctors who treated victims described pain that did not respond to standard painkillers. The reports were dismissed as patient exaggeration. In 1992, a published medical case report described a 57-year-old Australian man who was stung on the hand by a male platypus. The man reported pain much worse than the shrapnel wound he had received in combat. The pain lasted for weeks. Morphine, the strongest standard painkiller, did not work. It barely reduced the pain at all. The patient required nerve blocks for relief. The venom has since been analyzed. It contains dozens of distinct bioactive proteins. Some of those proteins are being studied as potential painkiller drugs, on the theory that they bind to pain receptors in ways no human-developed compound matches. Mammals do, in fact, have venom, specifically this one. The fourth objection was structural. Even if each individual trait could be confirmed, the combination of duckbill, beaver tail, otter feet, egg laying, and venom production look like the deliberate work of a hoaxer assembling parts from multiple animals. No real species, the argument went, could have evolved this combination by chance. The argument is essentially, this is too weird to be real. The response came from genetics. In 2008, an international team sequenced the platypus genome and published the result in Nature. The genome confirms that the platypus is a single, coherent species that diverged from other mammals approximately 166 million years ago. The platypus lineage and the placental mammal lineage split during the early Cretaceous. The platypus is not a chimera. It is what mammals could have looked like if evolution had taken a different branch. The objection was wrong because evolution is not constrained by what looks reasonable to a London naturalist. This objection was not raised until very recently, because nobody had thought to look. In 2020, a research team led by Paula Spaeth-Annick at Northland College in Wisconsin was using ultraviolet light to examine museum specimens of flying squirrels. The flying squirrels biofluoresce. They glow pink under UV light. The team decided to check other unusual mammals. They put museum platypus specimens under UV light. The platypus fur glowed blue-green. The discovery was published in the journal Mammalia. It was the first documented case of biofluorescence in a monotreme mammal. The cause is unknown. Theories include camouflage against UV-sensitive predators, intraspecies recognition signaling, or no functional purpose at all, a chemical property of the fur that simply happens. A platypus under UV light looks like a glowing teal phantom. This is genuinely real. This has been verified across multiple museum specimens and confirmed in live animals. The sixth objection is something most biologists never explicitly raised, but it falls out of the same line of reasoning. Surely a mammal that eats meat and insects still has a stomach. The platypus does not have a stomach. Its esophagus connects directly to its intestine. There is no gastric sac, no acid secretion, no pepsin digestion. The platypus is one of a small number of vertebrate species that has lost the stomach evolutionarily. Several fish species have also lost the stomach, and so have the echidnas, platypus's only living monotreme relatives. The platypus does have small grinding plates in its bill that crush prey before swallowing, and the intestine handles the rest. It works fine. The animal has been doing this for tens of millions of years. The textbook definition of a mammal as an animal with a stomach was always casual. The platypus enforces the looser definition. The seventh objection, again implicit rather than explicit, is that mammals have two sex chromosomes, X and Y, with females typically XX and males typically XY. The platypus has 10 sex chromosomes. Females have 10 X chromosomes, males have 5X and 5Y chromosomes. During meiosis, the chromosomes line up in a translocation chain, 5 XY pairs sliding past each other in sequence before separating. No other mammal has this system. No other animal has been documented with this particular translocation chain mechanism. It is a one-species sex determination mechanism. Geneticists have studied it for decades and still do not fully understand how it evolved or how it functions reliably without errors. The platypus's reproductive cells are doing chromosomal arithmetic that should not work every generation. The textbook definition of mammalian sex chromosomes was again slightly wrong. We have walked through 7 objections that naturalists raised over the course of 2 centuries against the platypus being a real, single, coherent species. Every objection was wrong. The bill is real, the eggs are real, the venom is real, the chimeric body plan is a single evolutionary lineage, the biofluorescence is real, the missing stomach is real, the 10 sex chromosomes are real. The platypus is the rare case where the more confident the scientific community became about what mammals could not do, the more emphatically the platypus did exactly that thing. George Shaw cut at the bill with scissors in 1799. The cut marks are still visible. The platypus is still real. You are a platypus. 2 centuries of taxonomy has tried to explain you. Most of it failed. If you watched all the way through, hit subscribe. Next week, the marsupial that mates itself to death.